There's share. Let me see if I could share this. Can you guys see that? Can you see my screen? Oh, can you see it?
Yep.
This cracked me up. I want to share this with everybody. Everybody can see the role of gut health in rosacea.
Yes, we
All
can
right,
see
so
it.
this is from Medscape Pharmacist, and I just read it this morning,
Piece
and
of
it just
pizza?
cracked me up. I'm going to read the
You want
first.
some pizza?
Please everybody turn your
Muting people.
mute everybody. Growing evidence suggests that the skin and the gut may be more closely linked than once thought. And boy, did I get a laugh out of that. People, don't wait for the medical folks to bless what we all know is true. So, yes, growing evidence suggests that the skin and the gut may be more closely linked. Everybody knows that. Everybody who has rosacea knows that certain foods make them break out. We've been talking about the relationship between the gut or the intestine, the digestive system, and the skin for decades, literally since the 1990s. I've been talking about it, and now finally we've got the medical folks blessing it in the journal Biomolecules, a comprehensive review explored the evolving science of how diet and probiotics may influence rosacea. And this is just the way science is. A guy named Thomas Kuhn wrote a book in the 1960s called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And in this book, he talked about how science progresses over the years. And one of his famous quotes was, "Science progresses funeral by funeral." In other words, the old way has to die out before the new way can kick in. Don't wait for the old way to die out. Our clients and our customers are counting on us. They don't want to wait for us to be dead before our recommendations become verified and validated by medical folks. And along the same lines here, if you look over where I'm pointing the cursor, can you see this? Harnessing the microbiome to treat melanoma. Even melanoma is now being used. Melanoma is now being treated by using digestive health strategies. There is an intimate connection between digestive health and the skin. If we're serious about the skin, we've got to understand how the digestive system works, how the intestine works. We're not supposed to be nutritionists. We're skincare therapists here. But if we're interested in helping our clients with their skin health issues, we have to understand the relationship between the digestive system and the skin. And perhaps we can talk about that on another founders meeting. I just read that this morning. I thought it was really intriguing or interesting. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, let me get this share off here. Stop share. All right, today we're going to talk about ingredient decks, which is the most important thing to understand when it comes to assessing the value of a skincare product. Whenever somebody asks me what I think of a skincare product, and I get asked this all the time, I'm sure you guys do too, I always look at the ingredient deck or have to do some research and find the ingredient deck. It doesn't matter how the product feels when you put it on. There's all kinds of ingredients that skincare formulators can use that make a product feel like something. And the average consumer, and unfortunately a lot of skincare professionals, collapse two separate ideas: how a product feels with how a product works. How a product feels is strictly a function of what's happening on the surface of the skin when you apply the product. And for the most part, when you feel your skin after you apply a product, you're feeling the product. It's not telling you anything about the skin. Our job is to change the skin. How a product feels when you put it on doesn't tell you anything about how the skin is going to be affected by that product, the kind of changes that are going to be made on the skin. And of course, the best way to tell how good a skincare product is to use it and wait a few weeks and see what your skin looks like after a week, or even, it shouldn't even take a few weeks if it's an effective product. It should only take a day or two and see what happens, or to put it on a cut or scrape or wound and see what happens if it's accelerating the healing of the broken skin. But we don't really have time to do that when we're assessing the value of a skincare product or determining whether we want to buy that product or not. So the compromise, way better than just putting on your skin and saying, oh, that feels nice, and not quite as good as waiting a week or a few days to see what the product's doing. The compromise is going to be the ingredient deck. We have to be ingredient deck readers. Now, this is a little bit tougher than it sounds because ingredient decks are tricky. The names on the ingredient decks are sometimes very complicated, very hard to pronounce. Sometimes they're not exactly the name that you're assuming that they're going to be. They've got disguised names. So it's a little bit tricky. And then there's a lot of ingredients sometimes on an ingredient deck, and trying to wade through sometimes 100 different ingredients, literally, as we're going to show you here in a minute, literally 100 plus ingredients, it's a Herculean task, especially if you're not a chemist. So I'm going to try today to sort of break things down a little bit to make it easy to understand, because it is so important to understand an ingredient deck. So first things first, we're going to show a couple of ingredient decks here in a sec so you can kind of get a feel for it. But just to give you a general idea, ingredients are all designated by what's called the INCI, which is the official name for a product. So aqua instead of water. These are standardized names that you'll see. So sometimes the names on the ingredient deck aren't going to be the names that you'll see marketed because of this INCI designation. The INCI name is the standardized scientific name for the ingredients. That's first of all. So ingredients are all going to have a standardized name, the INCI name. In fact, a couple years ago, we had to change our names to match the INCI designation, and we got people asking, hey, did you change your formula? How come this ingredient's not in there anymore? And we had to say, no, we just had to change the name, the nomenclature on the ingredient deck. So all nomenclatures are standardized by what's called the INCI, which is the International Nomenclature Cosmetic Ingredient Name, INCI, International Nomenclature Cosmetic Ingredient Name. Secondly, you guys all probably know this, that ingredients are listed in descending order based on their concentration. So the highest ingredient present in the highest amount is going to be listed first and then gradually down. And this is very important because this will give you, once you start to get a feel for this, you'll kind of get a general sense of the percentage of an ingredient that's in a product. And I'm going to show you, I'll show you what I mean here in a sec when we go over a couple of products. The third basic, I guess you could say, is active versus inactive. Now, this is not formal, it's not legal. An active can be sort of fudged, but for the most part, an active ingredient is going to be an ingredient that changes something in the skin. Excuse me. In order to create a change in the skin, you've got to work a gray area in FDA regulations, because technically, if something creates a change in the skin, it's considered to be a drug. And so most skincare products are not going to create changes in the skin, because if they did, they would be drugs. The gray area or the loophole is in terms of ingredients that are found in your body. If an ingredient is found in your body, it's not a drug. For the most part, there's still some gray area there too, but for the most part, if an ingredient is found in your body, it's not going to be a drug. And this is how cosmeceuticals are allowed to market themselves as creating a change. Peptides and nutrients. Peptides and nutrients are found in your body, so they're not drugs. Now, there are some exceptions to that, such as hormones and such as retinoic acid, which are found in your body, but they are drugs. So forgetting those exceptions, for the most part, if you want an ingredient and then a product to be active, it has to feature nutrients. And to a certain extent, peptides, although those won't really work as effectively unless the nutrients are present. And this is a very important point. Peptides will not work effectively if the cell doesn't have nutrients. Vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin K, retinoids. These are required for a cell to be able to function so that a peptide can actually do its work. A peptide, for example, is like, you can think of you're putting your foot on the gas, right? The peptide is like putting your foot on the gas pedal. Let's just say to stimulate collagen production. There's lots of things peptides do, but let's just pick stimulating collagen production. So you have a peptide that stimulates collagen production. That's like putting your foot on the gas for collagen production. But if you put your foot on the gas, but you don't, on the gas pedal, I should say, if you put your foot on the gas pedal, but you don't have any gas in the engine, putting your foot on the gas pedal isn't going to help you. You got to have gasoline in the engine for that to work. And that's why essential nutrients are so fundamental. They're fundamental to any other ingredient because they're the gasoline in the engine. You can put your foot on the pedal all you want, but if you don't have any gasoline in the engine, you're not going anywhere. It's the gasoline in the engine that counts, and that's why we work almost exclusively in terms of our active ingredients with essential nutrients because that's gasoline in the engine. Okay, so that's first of all. You have active, this distinction between active and inactive ingredients. For the most part, your active ingredients are going to be nutrients, and to a slightly lesser extent, peptides, as long as you have a gasoline in the engine. There's also things like stem cells, for example, or not stem cells, but stem cell extracts. There's no stem cells in products. Let's get that clear right now. There are no stem cells in skincare products. There are stem cell extracts, or what they call conditioned media. And even the conditioned media is going to have some good stuff in it, but again, unless you have gasoline in the cell or gasoline in the engine, they're not going to do much. We're thinking, when I'm formulating, I'm thinking of how am I going to get gasoline in the engine? And then there's also going to be allergens and irritants. Those are, for the most part, not a big issue. Most skincare products are not going to have allergens, and you can never really predict an allergic reaction anyway, because people's immune systems are so idiosyncratic and personal to them, and some people have immune problems. For the most part, you're not going to have reactions to skincare ingredients unless you have a compromised immune system or a broken or wounded or compromised skin barrier. Then there's different types or different classes of ingredients. You've got water. That's the most common ingredient. That'll usually be the first ingredient on an ingredient deck, usually anywhere from 50, 60, up to 90 or 95%. Then you have what are called humectants. A humectant is an ingredient that attracts water, binds to water. Glycerin is the classic humectant. Hyaluronic acid is a humectant. Honey can be a humectant. Sugars like sorbitol, you'll sometimes see are humectants. The glycols, propylene glycol and butylene glycol, are humectants. Their job is to pull water out of the environment, pull water out of the atmosphere, suck it up into the skin. However, if you have a environment that has a low humidity, like in Colorado or Nevada or Arizona or this part of the country in general, humectants are not necessarily a good idea, because instead of pulling water out of the atmosphere, they're going to pull it out of your skin. And they can actually induce dryness, which is one of the reasons why I don't really formulate with humectants. The next class of ingredients are the emollients. The emollients are the trickiest. They're the smoke and mirror of skincare ingredients. Emollients are ingredients that kind of soften and smooth. They fill in the gaps between skin cells that are ordinarily going to be filled with lipids, but under conditions of lipid deficiency, or if you're not, or if you stripped your lipids after you use a cleanser, there's going to be little gaps between your skin cells. Emollients go in there and fill those up. And there's a whole bunch of those. Skincare companies love emollients because consumers like the feel. Emollients are not going to do anything to help your skin get better. They're not going to change chemistry in your skin. They're strictly going to create a feel on the skin. Silicone, vegetable oils, shea butter, cocoa butter. These are all examples. Fatty alcohol, cetyl alcohol, stearyl alcohol, anything that says like a palmitate, like isopropyl palmitate, are going to be emollients. Usually they're going to be oils and butters and what are called esters for the most part. Those are your emollients. They're going to be, in a typical skincare product, they're going to be the third or fourth ingredients. They're not doing anything for the skin, but they create a feel. Occlusives, Vaseline, mineral oil, beeswax, lanolin, some silicones, some butters. These are ingredients that cover the skin. They form a physical barrier on the surface of the skin. This physical barrier on the surface of the skin can be counterproductive, and usually is, in the sense that it will suppress skin chemistry. Suppressing skin chemistry is obviously something that you don't want to be doing as an esthetician or as a skincare professional. On the other hand, there are times when occlusives can be beneficial, and that's post-trauma. After burns or after laser or after peels, sometimes occlusion can protect the skin. Not necessarily after peels unless you're doing a really serious peel, like a TCA 40% or something. But mostly for lasers, or also for eczema, where the skin barrier is disrupted, or for burns, occlusive ingredients can be helpful. Then there are the emulsifiers. The emulsifiers are the most problematic of all the ingredients next to the preservatives and the fragrances. The emulsifiers are designed to pull oil and water together. Your skin is made up of an oil and water combination. Cells are made up of oil and water, and so emulsifiers can disturb skin chemistry and skin cell chemistry. And this makes the selection of emulsifiers probably the most critical decision that a formulator has to make. Formulators are always looking for the most mildest emulsifiers that will have the most effect, and it's tricky to find them. I personally don't like working with emulsifiers, and that's why our formulations are so bizarre, because they're basically non-emulsify. And so when you don't use an emulsifier, you get a different type of product that's much milder, but not necessarily as stable. Emulsifiers are stable. Emulsifiers have stabilizing properties. So if you don't have an emulsifier, you're going to be basically looking at a gel or a serum. And that's pretty much how most of my products are formulated, is non-emulsified. And then you have thickeners, gums. These are products that increase the viscosity of ingredients that increase the viscosity or the thickness or the solidity of a product. And then the last class of ingredient are going to be your active ingredients. Those, unfortunately, are the kinds of ingredients that you find very tiny amounts of in most skincare products. Esthetician and spa and medical products will have more activity. We'll talk about that here in a second. And the whole formulation pantheon of ingredients is rounded out by things like preservatives, fragrances, colorants. Obviously, you want as little of all of those as possible. Preservatives are a necessary evil, but if you formulate a product correctly, you don't even need to have a preservative, and I try to work unpreserved as much as possible. So those are your basic classes of ingredient categories, I guess we could say. Then I want to talk about some specific products. We create some slides for specific products so you can kind of wade through how to deconstruct an ingredient deck. Carrie, can you put the first slide up?
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Oh, yeah, that's the first one. Now you can see right away this is going to be a problem product. There's no reason why anybody needs to put all of these ingredients on their skin. When you put a bunch of ingredients in a product, two things are going to happen. Number one, you don't know how all of these ingredients are going to interact with each other. And number two, you don't know how all of these ingredients are going to interact with the skin. We take for granted, because the skin is so resilient and so forgiving, we take for granted that you can rub stuff on the skin. But it really is not it's not kind and gentle to the skin to put a bunch of stuff on it, especially stuff that's not going to do anything. So this particular product, the first ingredient, which is usually going to be water in most products, is algae extract. So what is algae extract? Algae extract is when you take algae and put it in water. And algae extract is a disguised word for water with some algae in it. Now, it turns out that algae has some interesting properties, but they don't have any active properties. Algae have humectant properties. They pull in water. If you can imagine what algae and seaweed are pretty much synonymous. If you've seen seaweed on the ocean, you know that seaweed is soggy because it sucks up water. That sucking up effect is created by a type of molecule called a polysaccharide. And polysaccharides are a class of ingredient that don't really have a lot of activity unless they can access the dermis or the lower epidermis. In that case, like on a burn or a wounded skin, algae can be stimulated. They can stimulate healing. But on intact skin, algae extracts are not going to do very much because they don't get through the stratum corneum barrier. Algae extracts, which are mostly composed of these soggy polysaccharides, are number one, water soluble. As you all probably know, the stratum corneum is a barrier to water. So water soluble ingredients don't get through the stratum corneum. In fact, I should probably just digress real quickly. In chemistry, there's two types of ingredients, or two types of chemicals: oil chemicals and water chemicals. We say hydrophilic for water chemicals, lipophilic for fat chemicals. Lipophilic means fat-loving, hydrophilic means water-loving. And roughly speaking, chemicals can be designated as either hydrophilic or lipophilic. There's some that have both hydrophilic and lipophilic qualities, but we're not going to talk about those. So just to make a broad distinction, hydrophilic versus lipophilic. And I'm always talking about this. If you ever come to any of my classes, I'm always talking about this distinction because hydrophilic ingredients do not penetrate the stratum corneum. This is so important. Hydrophilic ingredients do not penetrate the stratum corneum, and that's a good thing. You don't want hydrophilic ingredients to penetrate the stratum corneum because if anything, if something that was water loving could penetrate through the stratum corneum, every time it rained, you would turn into a puddle on the sidewalk. The stratum corneum is a barrier to hydrophilic ingredients. So right away, you can see the first ingredient here, algae extract, isn't going to do much for the skin unless you can get to the dermis or epidermis unless the stratum corneum is broken and you can get to the basal layer or the dermis. Second ingredient, mineral oil. Again, mineral oil is not going to do anything for the skin. There is no activity in mineral oil. In fact, the reason mineral oil is recommended by dermatologists is because it's inert. It doesn't do anything. It's simply a molecule that has a feel for the skin. It feels like something on the surface of the skin. The third ingredient is petrolatum. Petrolatum is the chemical name for Vaseline, or Vaseline is the brand name for petrolatum. Petrolatum is solid mineral oil, or if you like, mineral oil is liquid petrolatum. In fact, that's one of the names, is liquid petrolatum. So between these three ingredients, algae extract, mineral oil, and petrolatum, nothing's going to happen to your skin except to feel, and you're already at close to 80% of the product, maybe more. Then you come into glycerin. As we said, glycerin is a humectant. It sucks water up from the atmosphere. Or if you're in Colorado, it sucks it up from your skin. Not a smart ingredient in a skincare product that's going to stay on the skin and supposed to moisturize or soften the skin. You can tell right away just by these four ingredients that you're dealing with a very poorly formulated product. And by the way, this is a very expensive product. I'm not even going to tell you what it is, but it costs hundreds of dollars an ounce for this product. The fifth ingredient is isohexadecane. Whenever you see A-N-E, like at the end of a word, you're talking about what's called an alkane, technically, and these are ingredients that are derived from oil. When they drill for oil, they break the oil up into sections or into components, and some of those components are used in skincare products, like mineral oil, like petrolatum, and like isohexadecane, which again is going to just strictly give you a feel on the skin. Microcrystalline wax, that is a thickener and a wax that gives the body solidity. Now, this is a very important ingredient, this microcrystalline wax. Why? Because logic will tell you, if you just use logic here, that you don't want a lot of wax in a product, otherwise you'd have a candle on your skin. So waxes in an ingredient deck are only going to be in at fractions of or at small percentages or fractions of a percent. Something along the lines of 0.5 to 1, at the most 2%. Any more than that, you'll have a waxy feel on your skin. Nobody wants that. So this ingredient is a very important ingredient in the order, in terms of its order on the deck, because now you know that everything after the wax is only going to be in there in at a small percentage. You follow what I'm saying here? Because the wax is only in there at a small percentage, everything that follows the wax is going to be in at even less than that small percentage. And of course, then you've got things like, after the microcrystalline wax, you've got lanolin alcohol. Lanolin alcohol is another sticky ingredient that creates a certain feel on the skin, and that's only in at a very, very small percentage. Eucalyptus oil, is that what the next one is here? Or did I skip one here? No. Lemon peel extract, or lime peel extract is a fragrance. Obviously, you're not going to have a lot of lime peel extract because it's very powerful stuff, so only a couple drops will give you a smell. So now you're talking about everything after those first 6 ingredients is in at tiny, tiny percentages. They're basically useless. They're just packing the ingredient deck. They're just there to fill out the ingredient deck, and you can see things like sesame seed oil, eucalyptus oil. These are fractions of a percent. Then you get into a whole bunch of oils, prunus, amygdalus, dulcis oil, which is, seed meal. That's a flour. That's a thickener. Sodium gluconate, copper gluconate. These are ingredients that are not going to have any impact on the skin at all. But you're paying for them, and you're putting them on your skin. They're not doing anything for you. And then you come down to the bottom here, you get into the preservatives, you got alcohol, you got fragrance. This is one of the most poorly formulated products you'll ever see. But it's very expensive and very famous and has a tremendous cachet. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want to, bad karma here. I don't want to name names, but anybody who's you may know what it is. Oh, Katrina, you're not supposed to say. How did she know? How did Katrina know? We got some smart Estes out there. Yeah, that's what it is, but I'm not going to say it. So you said it, I didn't. Okay. So, but you can see this is just a crazy thing on the skin. Why would anybody put all of these things on the skin? Now you see some cool ingredients here at the bottom, like niacin. There's a fraction of a percentage of niacin. Magnesium sulfate, zinc gluconate, these are fractions of a percent. They're not going to have any impact on your skin at all. There's less niacin and magnesium sulfate than there is preservative. So anyway, that's this is just a kind of, to me, this is a poster child of what's wrong with the skincare business from a cosmetic standpoint. Now, we're estheticians and skincare professionals in here, so we're not going to be using products like this. This is more from a department store kind of end user perspective. The next ingredient deck, this is more along our lines, along our speed. Can you compare? Were you able to put our comparison, Carrie, to ours? I can't hear you.
It's coming after. Ours
Okay.
is coming after
Okay,
this.
so this one here, I'm not going to mention the names, but this is pretty much a standard formula for vitamin C. The first ingredient is water. Now, if you know this product, you'll know that it's a very watery ingredient. You're probably looking about 80 or 90% water, probably 80% water in this ingredient deck. Ethoxydiglycol is a solvent. It improves the penetration of other ingredients. Now, there's a heck of a lot of solvent in here, a heck of a lot. Ethoxydiglycol is probably in this formula 20% or so. That is a lot of a solvent. And solvents are known for disturbing skin chemistry. It's not a good idea to put 20% of a 20% of a product or a product that has 20% solvent on your skin. But they have to because the third ingredient is ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid does not penetrate through the stratum corneum. Any basic biochemist or chemist can tell you that ascorbic acid is not going to get through the stratum corneum. So what they have to do is they have to put a whole bunch of solvent in there in order to get that ascorbic acid to penetrate. Whether it does or not is anybody's guess, but it's worse than that. Because both ethoxydiglycol, well, let me just continue first. The next ingredient is propylene glycol. Propylene glycol is it's a useless ingredient, but it does have a skin feel. It feels like something on the skin, makes the skin feel soft, and it's an emollient. And also sometimes propylene glycol can be used to improve penetration. So it might have a double effect here in improving penetration. As we said, ascorbic acid is not going to penetrate through the stratum corneum very well, which is why they got to use the ethoxydiglycol and the propylene glycol. Glycerin, as we said, is a humectant. It will pull moisture out of the air if there's moisture in the air. It will pull it out of the skin if there's no moisture in the air. It's not a great ingredient for Colorado. Laureth 23 is an ethoxylated emulsifier. Ethoxylation is a chemical process that makes molecules that are fatty watery. An emulsifier is like an adapter. An adapter has a male and a female and pulls everything together. An emulsifier has a male and a female. They're not really called a male and a female. They're called a hydrophilic and lipophilic. An emulsifier pulls water and oil together. Water and oil don't mix, right? Water and oil are pulled together by an adapter. So you think of a male and female pulling your male and female electrical cords together. An emulsifier pulls oil and water together. Laur, L-A-U-R, refers to lauric acid, which is a fatty acid. It's found in coconut. It's a really kind of an interesting fatty acid, as it turns out. It's got some interesting antifungal properties. F, and you'll see F a lot on emulsifiers, refers to an ethoxylate, which is a fancy way of saying water, which is a fancy term for a water-soluble ingredient. And Loreth has Lor and F pulled together. It's an emulsifier. Now, in this case, you don't really need an emulsifier. There's no oil in this product, so you don't really need an emulsifier. So it's actually somewhat extraneous, except for it's probably being used to improve the penetration of the ascorbic acid, which doesn't penetrate very well. There's a heck of a lot of ingredients that are in this formulation that are not there for you. They're there to get that ascorbic acid through the stratum corneum. Then you've got some vitamin E. That is a little bit oil soluble, and that might be one of the reasons why Loreth 23 is in there. And then you've got phenoxyethanol, which is a preservative. And then you've got something called triethanolamine, which raises the pH. Ascorbic acid has an acid pH. So triethanolamine raises the pH so it's not too acidic on your skin. Because if you put straight ascorbic acid on your skin, it's going to be acidic. It's not going to feel good. So they have to alkalinize it. And then there's a little ferulic acid. Ferulic acid is an adaptogen, has a few benefits in terms of in protection from the environment, maybe a little bit of sun protection. Panthenol is a B vitamin, and then hyaluronic acid. All of these are at very trace amounts. Both ferulic acid and ascorbic acid, which are essentially the two active ingredients in this product, break down in the presence of water. And they break down significantly in the presence of water. And you all know this because your product turns brown. This product turns brown right in the bottle. It'll turn brown on the shelf. Number one, if it's brown, you're not getting the active ingredient that you think you're getting. And number two, once it starts to degrade, you're actually getting a pro-aging product instead of an anti-aging product. Now, this product supposedly has 15% ascorbic acid and 0.5% ferulic acid. That's when it's made at the factory. By the time you put it on your skin, or by the time it sits on the shelf and then you put it on your skin, or sits in your medicine cabinet at home, you put it on your skin, you don't know if there's 10% ascorbic acid, 9% ascorbic acid, 8% ascorbic acid. This is a very poorly formulated product. And you all know this, but yet it seems to be everywhere. No, Katrina, don't be naming names out there. Katrina, bad karma. But yes, that could be that. We'll say it could be. Put ours up there now. Now, vitamin C is clearly an important ingredient. Look, this is our ingredient deck. Tetrahexadecyl ascorbate, the best of the best. Vitamin C, fat-soluble vitamin C. Not 15%, not 20%, not 25%. Almost 80%, 4/5 of every drop is going to be vitamin C. The second ingredient are esters. The second and third ingredient are esters that improve the penetration of the vitamin C and contribute skin softening. And then bisabolol and styroglyceretinate. Bisabolol is a chamomile extract for calming the skin, and styroglyceretinate is a skin lightening and anti-irritant ingredient that's derived from licorice root. That's it. 5 ingredients. You don't need a bunch of ingredients, and every one of those ingredients is going to be functional, and your skin is going to be there for a reason. And that's why, in my silly pharmacist brain, I don't see why anybody would carry anything but transdermal C serum for a vitamin C product, except for the fact that the other one has a lot of marketing behind it. But if you look at the ingredient deck, you can see there's no comparison. Why would you put 15% ascorbic acid on your skin when you have almost 80% tetrahexyldecyl ascorbate? Basically the same price too, by the way, for both of these products. One breaks down in days, one never breaks down. One is 15%, one is 78%. One has preservatives and triethanolamine and solvents, ingredients you don't need. The other only has 5 ingredients in it, all of which are functional on your skin. Again, in my crazy pharmacist brain, it's a no-brainer. There's no reason why anybody should use the former rather than the latter. Okay, next ingredient, ingredient deck. Now what one? Okay, this one. This one's another juicy one. Why the heck would anybody put so much on their skin? You know, there's a term that people are using now, minimalism, and I love minimalism. I don't like having a lot of stuff. But our products, our formulations are much more than minimalism. They're essentialism. They're not just few ingredients. There are few essential ingredients, the ingredients that you absolutely need to have to get effects on the skin. So this one, first ingredient is water. It's a lotion, so you can guess that it's going to be about 60 or 70% water. The second and third ingredients, the second ingredient is a buffer. It's an alkalinizing agent. It raises the pH of the product. Why do you want to raise the pH? Because the third ingredient is glycolic acid. Now, this particular product has almost 10% glycolic acid in it, which is a lot of glycolic acid. And you're not going to want 10% glycolic acid to sit on your skin because that could be irritating on the skin. So they raise the pH. That takes the bite out of the glycolic acid, but it also takes the effect out of the glycolic acid. Now, glycolic acid will still have some effects in terms of being hygroscopic or being a humectant. Hygroscopic is a fancy way of saying water trapping. So glycolic acid acts in two ways. It acts like an active ingredient, and you estheticians all know glycolic acid will kick butt when it's done correctly, but if it's buffered to where it's no longer acidic, it will still act like a humectant. So sodium glycolate plus glycolic acid raises the pH on the glycolic acid, so it doesn't have that aggressiveness, that bite, but it still has humectancy. It still attracts water, and so it has a certain feel that consumers like. Now, at this point, you're at about 80% of your product. Then you get into the wax. Cetyl olivate is a waxy emulsifier, usually in a product at 2 to 3%, which tells you everything after that ingredient is at less than 2 to 3%. And that's where you start to get into a bunch of nonsense ingredients. Pentylene glycol is a emollient. Cyclopentasiloxane, that is silicon. Whenever you see siloxane at the end of the word, you're talking about silicon. Cyclopentasiloxane is, the old name was cyclomethicone. And again, "-one" at the end of a word is a silicone. Consumers love silicone. Thus, manufacturers love silicone. Silicone doesn't do anything. Silicone in medical parlance is inert. Silicone is used in medical grade prosthetics because it's inert. Breast implants, hip implants, knee replacements, all of these are utilize silicone because of its inertia, because it doesn't do anything. So silicone does absolutely nothing, but due to its electrical nature, when you rub your finger on silicone, your finger microscopically levitates. And that microscopic levitation is perceived as smoothness and softness. And if you ever feel silicone, you go, "Oh, that feels really nice. That feels really smooth." Because what's happening is your finger is microscopically levitating off of the silicone. So there's no resistance. And that feels really, really interesting. Feels really good, but it doesn't do anything. But manufacturers love that, and consumers love that. Manufacturers love it because now they can have the consumer think that something's happening without anything happening. That's the perfect ingredient for a manufacturer, to have the consumer think something's happening without anything really happening, and that's why they love silicone. It's the fifth ingredient here. It's probably in at 1 or 2%. We saw isohexadecane. Remember, ane comes from ANE. That comes from oil or from petroleum processing or fossil fuel. Again, does nothing for the skin except for it has a certain feel. Sorbitan olivate, as you see, is it's similar to cetyl olivate, very similar emulsifying agent wax. At this point, you're down to fractions of a percent. And that's when you start to get into your tetrahexyldecyl-ascorbate, which is the vitamin C. Probably, I'm guessing, based on this ingredient deck, around 1 to 2% max. Glycerin, sericin, glycol, the rest of these aren't going to do anything with the exception of niacinamide. Again, small fractions of niacinamide. And then you get into your peptides and really your active ingredient in this product, the supposed active ingredient in this product, which is ethyl lactyl retinoate. You can see that there as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17th ingredient, ethyl lactyl retinoate. That is the retinol, or not the retinol, the vitamin A. It's a form of vitamin A that's very fancy schmancy that delivers a very small amount of vitamin A activity, but you can market it as a vitamin A product. So this essentially has an alpha hydroxy acid in it, glycolic acid, and a retinoid. That's the fancy name for vitamin A. Alpha hydroxy acid and a retinoid. That's really the bulk of this, the activity on this product. Everything else is window dressing. You got a couple peptides in there that are in there, very tiny amounts. Everything else is basically doing nothing. It's very tiny fractions of percentages. You're talking about 0.1%, 0.2%, that kind of thing. And you can see how many different ingredients. There's probably 60 ingredients that you're putting on your skin at this point, all in order to get some glycolic acid, some tetrahexyl decylascorbate, and some ethyl lactyl retinoate, or a little bit of retinol. Put our retinol product on, Carrie. We had 2 retinol products. This one is vitamin C, retinol and vitamin C, and then what we call our transdermal delivery system, which is the cap, and the benzoate and the glyceride esters. All of that forms the bulk of the gel, which allows for transdermal penetration. Do you have the next one on there? And this is my favorite, excuse me, my favorite retinol product. You got an ester and vitamin C, your first 2 ingredients. The ester is for penetration. The vitamin C is for vitamin C, obviously. Then you've got squalane, and then you've got this cap triglyceride, which is part of the retinol molecule. Retinol is mixed with cap triglyceride, vitamin E, phytosterols, carbon, fullerenes, which is also known as C60 or carbon 60, and then BHT protects the retinol. The retinol, the cap triglyceride, and the BHT are how retinol comes. Retinol is produced by a couple. There's only about a few companies in the world that make retinol, and the retinol we use has cap triglyceride and BHT in it. So we use that retinol. We add the esters and the vitamin C and the vitamin E and the phytosterols. This one in particular is 5% retinol. We also have a 1% retinol. This is the most powerful retinol product you'll ever get over the counter. In fact, it may be the most powerful retinoid you can get even with a prescription, because it's probably just as potent as as retinoic acid or Retin A, 0.05%. That's the standard prescription. Again, you only need 1 or 2 drops. The knock on retinol is that it's aggressive and stimulating, and that's why people use things like ethyl lactyl retinoate. Even though you're getting 5% retinol, there are people who could use this every day. I don't recommend you use it every day, but there's still people who use it every day. You can certainly use it 3 times a week. You're estheticians. You deserve the real deal, not the pretend stuff. We're giving you the real deal. I'm a pharmacist. Remember, I'm thinking pharmacist. I'm thinking pharmacy. I'm thinking medicine. I'm thinking real. I call the company The Truth because this is real. You deserve what's real. You're smart enough to be able to handle retinol. Your clients are smart enough to be able to handle retinol as well. We've took all of the potential problems out through the formulation strategy. And so these are cleverly formulated products that stand in contradistinction to any other product that you're going to be able to use, from the ingredient level upward, from the formulation itself upwards. And all you got to do is look at the ingredient deck. This is got 6 or 7 ingredients in it compared to 40 or 50 ingredients, and it's got way more potency than any other retinol product that you'll find, even with these few ingredients. That's why I say it's minimal ingredients, but it's essential. Not minimalism, it's essentialism. All right, was there one more that we were going to show here?
Nope, that's it.
That was it? I thought there was one more. Okay. Okay.
There's questions though. I know there's
okay,
going to
good. be. So yeah, we got 15 minutes here. Let me think if there's anything else I want to say. I think that should be it. Anything?
Carmen has a question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Carmen. I think you asked earlier. I saw that. I meant to answer you. Propylene glycol is not automobile antifreeze. Let me say it again, because there's a bunch of mythology out there. Propylene glycol is not automobile antifreeze. Ethylene glycol is automobile antifreeze. Just because something says in chemistry, you got to read every word. Ethylene glycol is not propylene glycol. Now, antifreeze is not what people think it is. Antifreeze is just something that keeps something from freezing. So something freezes at 30 degrees, say. If you put an antifreeze in it, now it's not going to freeze until 20 degrees or 10 degrees. In other words, it makes it more difficult for something to freeze. Salt is an antifreeze. Sugar is an antifreeze. Just because something makes it harder for something to freeze doesn't mean it's toxic. In fact, Ethylene glycol, the only reason people consider it toxic is because it's toxic to dogs. Glycols taste sweet. Glycol is sugar, propylene glycol, pentylene glycol, butylene glycol, ethylene glycol. They have a certain sweetness to them. And when ethylene glycol happens to be used to make it harder for your engine to freeze, so instead of freezing when it's 30 degrees, now it'll freeze when it's 20 or when it's 10 or when it's 5. But when your antifreeze spills out on the garage floor, your dog will lick it up because it tastes sweet and your dog will die. So people have this connotation that because something's antifreeze that it's toxic and it's deadly. No, it's not true. Antifreeze is anything that makes it harder for a substance to freeze. And that could be salt, which obviously is not toxic, sugar, which is obviously not toxic, honey, which is obviously not toxic. Things that lower the freezing point, make it harder for something to freeze, do not inherently confer toxicity. So propylene glycol is not a toxic ingredient. It's just a useless ingredient, but it's not a toxic ingredient. No glycol is going to be toxic to humans. In fact, they're used in pharmacy. They're part of cough syrups and medicines because they're non-toxic and they have a little sweetness. They're just useless. That's not the same as toxic. Okay, so that is to answer that question. Let me see if there's any other questions here.
Another one on phenoxyethanol.
Phenoxyethanol is a preservative. What was the question? Is rated poorly, supposedly. Yes, phenoxyethanol is a known endocrine disruptor, and that's another problem with preservatives. Parabens especially, but also phenoxyethanol. And generally, preservatives have this gender-bending effect. Sunscreens also do, and fragrances also do. They're endocrine disruptors in the sense that they mimic endocrine hormones, especially estrogen. And if you're interested in this topic, a friend of mine wrote a book called Fatal Conveniences, Darren O'Lean. And it's a great book that really goes into all the toxicity associated with these ingredients that are found in skincare products. And that includes especially preservatives and sunscreens. And every time I go on TikTok or Instagram or go out to the general public and talk about the toxicity of sunscreens, there are dermatologists and there's consumers and there's estheticians that just rip in. And I'm sorry to say it. Sunscreens are estrogenic. Preservatives like phenoxyethanol, whoever Elle Nadler is, you're a super smart esthetician. That's exactly right. Phenoxyethanol is an estrogen, is an endocrine disruptor. There's no need for them. Why are we putting ingredients in our products and on our skin that we don't need to be using? It's because people don't read ingredient decks. You guys do, obviously, but most consumers don't, and unfortunately, a lot of estheticians and even physicians don't read ingredient decks. And so skincare companies can get away with these kinds of things, and the FDA is, they're not necessarily there to protect us. So we got to be on our own, which is why you want as few ingredients as possible in your products. You want to look for only ingredients that are going to have an effect on your client's skin. You want to look for ingredient decks that do not have the endocrine disruptors and the toxic ingredients and the preservatives and things that aren't going to benefit your client, that are just there for the marketer, for the manufacturer. And that's really what the preservative is there for, is for the manufacturer to be able to sell his product. That's not fair. Clever formulation does not need to have phenoxyethanol in it. Okay. What else? Did I miss any other questions here?
Oh, what was the name of that book again?
It's called Fatal Conveniences, Darren O'Lean.
Elaine just put a question in there too, Ben.
Elaine. Oh, Elaine. Hi, Elaine. I have known Elaine for a long time. Elaine, may I ask a medical question for a patient who's on hydrocortisone for a skin condition? Yes. You want hydrocortisone is a steroid. Danica, you read that? Danica read the book. Steroids you have to taper off on those. You definitely want to do that with a physician. Steroid drugs are used to suppress the immune system. The immune system becomes activated when it's attacked. In my humble opinion, I'm just a pharmacist, but in my humble opinion, it's better to figure out what the heck's causing the attack than it is to suppress the immune system. Nonetheless, hydrocortisone, dexamethasone, prednisone, these are often used as medical treatments for suppressing the immune system or as anti-inflammatories, and yes, they have to be tapered off. Elaine, I would do it with the doctor. I would have it tapered off with the doctor because it can be very serious. You don't want to. What happens is when you use an artificial steroid, a prescription or a drug steroid, your body stops making steroids. And that means when you go off the hydrocortisone or the prednisone, now you don't have any steroids. And that means if you have an emergency of some kind, you're going to be in big trouble. because your steroids are there to help your body handle emergencies. So for a short period of time, if you just discontinue the drug without weaning yourself off, you're going to go through a period of time, maybe weeks, depending on how long it's been that you've been on the steroid drug, where you're not making any steroids. And that puts your body in a very compromised position. So you want to taper off slowly. So as you're tapering off the drug, your body is replacing that with its own natural steroids. And that's the purpose of the tapering.
Okay, and then just a quick question, Ben.
Hi, Elaine.
Hey,
Good
is
to
there
see
a
you. I like your hair
product?
long. I haven't
Thank
seen your hair
you.
long.
Yeah, that was a hair washing day today.
Nice.
Is there something she can take, like omega-6, to
While
kind
she's
of
tapering?
transition?
While she's
Yeah,
tapering, it depends on her condition. Does she have a skin condition?
yeah. That's
But,
I texted you her. She had that gnat so
oh,
bad.
she's the one with that autoimmune problem. That looked
Yeah,
like was it autoimmune? I guessed it was autoimmune.
yeah. They put her on 40 milligrams
Okay.
hydrocortisone. Totally calmed down. I saw her last week.
Okay.
But I said, taper that off according to your doc. So
Yes, definitely have her doctor work with her. And yes, I would have her use the omega as she's
okay,
tapering off. That would be the best suggestion.
okay, perfect. Thank
Thank you. Good
you.
to see you.
See ya. You
Bye.
too. I love your stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Been using it since 2019, and I get so many
Skin is off.
compliments
Yeah,
on
your
my
skin looks
skin.
awesome. Your skin
So,
looks
yeah. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Lane's in Alaska, by the way, just so you know. All right. What else? Nobody else have questions? Anybody want to attack me for anything?
I have a question.
Yes.
If you have skin irritation whenever you're near gluten,
Yes, whenever you're near gluten,
yeah,
that would be a severe problem. Most people don't have skin problems from gluten, but if you have that, I would be working on your digestive health. That sounds like a leaky gut issue.
yeah, I am. So I was wondering, she mentioned omega-6. Do you open up the capsule and put it on your skin?
No, omega-6 healing cream.
Oh, do you sell that?
Yeah. We call it omega. We just refer to it as omega-6, but yes, omega-6 healing cream.
Okay.
Yes. And a shout out to Brandy, who I see over there. Brandy Edgecombe. Nice to see you from Philadelphia. Philadelphia, PA, my old stomping grounds. Actually, not quite Philadelphia, but close enough. All right, who else?
I had a question for you, Ben.
Yes.
When you're talking about the omega-6, I understand it was formulated for burn
Burns.
victim. Would
Yes.
that help? I have a sister who has severe eczema. Would that help with eczema?
100%. But that being said, eczema is an immune problem.
Oh, she has all kinds of immune issues, and I'm not going to solve that overnight.
You're not going to solve that overnight. But yes, omega-6 can be incredibly soothing, anti-inflammatory, and there are cases where it will actually help the eczema disappear. But as long as there's immune attack and barrier disruption, that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's her diet for sure, but that's for another day.
That's another day, but you can still do a lot with omega-6 healing cream, absolutely. And your skin looks great too. You must be using Truth. I can.
I am.
You can tell through Zoom when people are using Truth because it just makes your skin look so healthy. Thank you so much, Brandy. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Let's see. I see some more questions.
Thoughts on witch hazel?
Yeah. Witch hazel is not really witch hazel. When you see witch hazel on a product, you're seeing witch hazel extract. Witch hazel is an herb. It's an awesome herb. It's an awesome, really incredibly medicinal, healing, anti-inflammatory. But what most witch hazel in products is witch hazel extract, and that's a combination of alcohol, water, and witch hazel. Not that it's bad. It's actually quite good, but it is a little bit on the medicinal side, more for healing, anti-inflammatory effects than for everyday usage. And then, let's see, where do we have here? How does an esthetician with a history of using medical grade products? Okay, so let's talk about medical grade first of all. Is Catherine here?
Yes, she's here.
As she can.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Hi, Catherine. Where are you? Hi, Catherine. Good to see you.
I'm from New Jersey,
Whereabouts?
Bergen County.
Oh, I'm from Trenton.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm I'm in Glassboro because my
you are?
boyfriend's doing in Spare Medical Center. They're doing an addition, so
awesome.
we're having like a long distance thing. So I'm here for the weekend.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I love New Jersey, especially this time of year. I love New Jersey.
Yes.
So and New Jersey gets a bad rap. Everybody out there, it's a beautiful, beautiful state. It's not all over. So, all right. So, medical grade is one of my favorite words to talk about because medical grade, while it has this kind of sound like medicine, you think medicine, medical grade refers to prosthetics, that are inert. So a medical grade refers to a stent or a hip prosthetic or knee prosthetic, meaning it doesn't do anything.
Okay.
So medical grade means something doesn't do anything. But when you're saying medical grade, you mean like medicine, I assume you mean. Are you a medical esthetician?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I assume that's what you mean. And all of our products are equipotent to anything that's medical grade, in fact, even more. And we will, as Carrie said, we train you. And how did you hear about us?
Through your Instagram ads. I saw
Okay,
it.
awesome. We will train you 100% and you will
Yeah.
get more powerful and more effective products than anything you'll get that's medical grade.
I have the serums right now for my hydrodermabrasion machines. The
Oh,
peel.
you do? Oh, okay.
I do. So, and I
Right.
have tried some
And
of the post
you
kits.
know how I like to formulate. I
Yes,
like to formulate
definitely.
potent. These all came from the pharmacy, and the pedigree on all these products, the DNA on all these products is healing the skin. And that's
Okay.
really the mission here. Even just beautification, even just moisturization is really healing.
Right.
And we have, as estheticians, we have to really think about that. Just plain old dry skin is a health issue.
Correct.
Hyperpigmentation obviously is a health issue, and eczema and
Correct.
psoriasis and acne, those are obviously health issues, but even plain old dry or aging skin is a health issue. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Ben,
Yes.
Cassandra is here, Teresa Collins. She was saying, could we please elaborate on endocrine disruptors next?
Yes, the endocrine system is your hormone system that involves hormones that travel through the blood. There's various types of hormones. They call them paracrine hormones, autocrine hormones. Endo means inside, and endocrine, remember how I talked about how suffixes like ain mean something and om means something and own means something? Well, the suffix on hormones is ine. Endocrine means hormones inside the blood. These are most of the hormones that we think about. They're the hormones that travel from a gland to different cells in the body via the bloodstream. They're called endocrine hormones. The most well-known of the endocrine hormones are the steroid hormones. And those are hormones like cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. These hormones are involved in reproduction and life management. They help us deal with life. Fertility and reproduction are one of obviously the most important things an animal, a human animal, or any animal has to do. So that's part of dealing with life. And so the endocrine hormones are also, when we think about them, most people think of the sex hormones or the reproductive hormones. Endocrine disrupting hormones are really endocrine disrupting molecules are really molecules that disrupt sex hormones. Specifically one sex hormone, and that's estrogen. So endocrine disruptors are hormones that disrupt estrogen. Disruption of estrogen can potentially throw the body completely out of whack because estrogen, and there's really a bunch of estrogens, estrogen is a family, we call it estrogen, but it's really a family, are very fundamental molecules, not only for reproduction, but also for sexuality. Also, because reproduction involves cell division, when you disrupt reproduction, you throw off how cells divide. And throwing off how cells divide can lead to cancer, because that's a cell division issue. So between gender, male, female, between cell division, cancer, and between fertility, which is what estrogen regulates, disturbing estrogen can have dramatic negative impact on the body. There are lots of things in nature, or not nature, in industry, that can disrupt estrogen metabolism, leading to cancer, leading to gender disruption. And this is usually in utero. Once the baby's born, that's not an issue, but in utero, gender disruption, and leading to cancer. And those are the three big problems with these estrogen disruptors, which are technically called endocrine disruptors. You may have heard the term xenoestrogens. Xeno means foreign. Xenoestrogens are another term for these estrogen disruptors, which are classified as endocrine disruptors. There are lots of chemicals that do this, plastics especially, even in shower curtains or in the plastic on your car, on new cars, that new car smell from the plastic, or plastic bags or plastic wrap. All of these can contain endocrine disruptors. In fact, pretty much all plastics will contain endocrine disruptors, but the real issue is when they're heated. So if you're drinking your water out of a water bottle, like one of those plastic water bottles, and keep the water bottle in your car, endocrine disrupting chemicals can leach out of that plastic into the water. If you're microwaving with your sandwich wrap, estrogen disrupting chemicals can leak out of the sandwich wrap, the plastic sandwich wrap, into saran wrap, I should say, into the sandwich. And if you're in a new car and has that new car smell and the car gets hot, you could be breathing in endocrine disruptors. There are endocrine disruptors or estrogen disruptors in the water via drugs. Birth control pills are estrogen disruptors. Hormone replacement therapy is endocrine disruptors. In fact, the endocrine disrupting properties of hormone replacement and a birth control are actually a good thing to the pharmaceutical or the medical model, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to interfere with your estrogen and your progesterone. Endocrine disrupting molecules are also found in skincare products, especially sunscreens and preservatives. And both of these have a tendency to disrupt estrogen, which can be something almost as mild as disrupting your period or your menstrual cycle, or something as major as causing breast cancer. Nobody really knows. And there's no way to know how much of an endocrine disruptor is going to be a problem. So long story short is, don't freaking use them. Don't put them on. Can't tell you whether it's going to cause cancer or it's going to cause a birth defect or it's going to cause menstrual issues or infertility, but it might. What's the point? Use zinc oxide. You don't need to use octamethoxycinnamate, or you don't need to use homosalsate or octosalicylate or any of these other chemical sunscreens which are known endocrine disruptors. Use zinc oxide. Don't use an endocrine disrupting preservative. If you have to use a preservative, use an herbal preservative. But even then, you got to be careful. Don't even use preservatives if you don't have to use preservatives. So they're best avoided entirely. Whether the degree of carcinogenesis or infertility or increased cell division or menstrual difficulties or menstrual problems that are going to be caused by the endocrine disruptors, I can't tell you the answer to that. But I can tell you that they're known to disturb estrogen chemistry, and whether or not today's infertility problems associated with these endocrine disruptors, we don't know, but there's probably a good possibility. There are famous cases of animals, frogs especially, and fish, becoming hermaphroditic. That means they have male sexual organs and female sexual organs together. And there's lots of these cases now because of estrogen disrupting chemicals that are dumped into the water. Pretty much all industrial chemicals will have some degree of endocrine disruption, but the most common ones are going to be, in skincare anyway, are going to be the preservatives and the fragrances, and then in industry found in plastics and plastic wraps. You may have heard of something called phthalates and BPA. Both of these are found in plastics and they're endocrine disruptors. And I forgot to mention fragrances also are notoriously endocrine disrupting. So really, you don't need to interact with these things in skincare. It's a little bit harder to avoid in terms of our plastics, because plastics are everywhere. But in skincare, they're egregious and they're not necessary, and they're totally best avoided. I hope I answered that question. And then Xeno does not have, somebody's asking about Xenoblock. No, that's the reason we use Xenoblock. Zinc oxide is a natural substance, zinc and oxygen. That's what zinc oxide is.
Ben, do you want to respond to this one? Lisa Nadler, can you help me understand why Truth does not make an eye cream?
Oh, the famous eye cream question. Well, first of all, we do make an eye cream, except one of the ways I formulate allows us to have, and I have a 1 o'clock meeting here. I just saw here. One of the ways I like to formulate is multifunctional. So we have, because of the way we formulate with active ingredients and only transdermal penetrance, just activity and transdermal penetrance, we do away with the ordinary distinctions. In other words, you don't have to worry about male-female skin anymore, because both male and female skin will benefit from Truth treatments. You don't have to worry about racial differences, Asian skin, black skin, Caucasian skin. We've done away with that distinction. We've done away with the distinction of oily skin and dry skin and sensitive skin, because Truth treatments are good for all skin types. And we've done away with the distinction of hand cream, neck cream, eye cream, back cream, butt cream, foot cream, all the other different parts of your body. Think about it. A keratinocyte is a keratinocyte. It doesn't matter whether that keratinocyte is here or on your butt or on the bottom of your foot or anywhere else. It's a skin cell. Now, eye creams, the reason why they make them is because the skin is very thin under the eye. So you got to be a little bit careful what you put on in your product. We've already taken care of that because my formulation strategy treats everything like it's thin skin, everything like it's sensitive skin. So Truth Transdermal C Balm is the best eye cream you will ever use. Truth Transdermal C Serum is the best eye serum you'll ever use. You don't need to have a special cream. It saves you money. It saves you a bunch of products in your medicine cabinet. It's just a simpler way of formulating. We shouldn't need a product for every part of our body. That's marketing. That's the way skincare companies get you to buy more skincare products. What we're interested in is driving collagen production out of the fibroblast, improving the production of moisture factors out of the keratinocyte, strengthening the barrier, and you can use all our products on every part of your body, head to toe, for that reason. That's why we don't have a specific kind of eye cream. Okay, and you guys, I have a 1 o'clock call that I'm late for. I apologize. I hope that was educational and informative. Thank you so much. I appreciate all you guys, and hopefully we'll see you on our next founders meeting.
Thank you, Ben.
Bye, that
Thank
was
you.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
Sponsored.
everybody.